Willful, bad faith, evasive. What are you, medieval times? You've got judges right now excoriating the Trump regime lawyers from the DOJ who are just being sent in there to be excoriated defending the regime's unlawful policies. I mean, you've got in Judge Zinnis's court, to remind people, District Court, Maryland, that's the case involving Abrego Garcia. You've got her saying, look, I'm trying to implement the Supreme Court's order to facilitate his return. Trump regime, I order discovery, provide responses to interrogatories and document requests. And she goes, all you're doing is objecting. Defendants' objections reflect a willful and bad faith refusal to comply with discovery obligations. The objections are overruled. Defendants must supplement their responses. And then she goes, their boilerplate, non-particularized objections are presumptively invalid and reflect a willful refusal to comply with the court's discovery order and governing rules. And then she goes more in the order and basically says, you're claiming that it's a false premise that the Supreme Court said facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia. It literally says facilitate the return. The false premise is you trying to mischaracterize what the Supreme Court's saying by literally misquoting the ruling from the Supreme Court and claiming the Supreme Court says something totally different. Harry, I'll have to ask you about that. If you've ever seen someone literally provide a fraudulent quote attributed to the Supreme Court and then citing a line that's not actually what the Supreme Court said. Then you have a case in front of Judge Beryl Howell involving some of the law firms. This one was the Perkins Coie case, where Trump issued the executive order that basically shut down Perkins and Coie from being a law firm by taking away security clearance of the lawyers and targeting them. And you have Judge Beryl Howell there, basically saying, I find it quite jarring and puzzling why you all keep targeting the words DEI. And then she goes on to, talk about, isn't it really what your purpose here is to just force Perkins Coie to their knees? Why don't you just admit what it is that you are really doing here? They sent, the Trump DOJ sent a guy named Richard Lawson to that case in front of Judge Leon. Another case involving Wilmer Hale, another law firm, Trump lawyer. He's like, there's no one else even with this guy, this Richard Lawson. He's like there solo, and they have him go judge to judge now and just get ripped to shreds by the various federal judges. And then separately, you had Judge Hellerstein in another case involving an injunction blocking, for now, sending more Venezuelans to concentration camps in El Salvador. And Hellerstein, like old school judge, is like, what are you doing? Like, what are you really doing here? Like y'all, you think that there's a war with Venezuela? Like, explain to me what you're saying, because you're treating people like this is the Inquisition from medieval times. He goes, so Harry, this has progressed, right? We're in heading towards the end of April. You and I have been covering these decisions since the inauguration. And as you and I predicted, they've been escalating, warning. And now we're in the find out stage, I think. What do you make of it all?
This is a royal shit show. The administration, when you're in the Department of Justice, you're held to higher standards. Judges will tear you apart if you play it even a little fast and loose. These guys have completely lost all credibility. They're the things in Zinnis's order, the things that Leon is saying, they're basically saying you guys are lying to us or being disingenuous. Yeah, this poor putz Lawson, basically his number one answer to some very basic questions like what steps have been taken is, I don't know. He's representing the United States. His client hasn't told him, purposefully hasn't told him. And this is with, just to fill it in with Zinnis, we kind of thought this could happen, but it's almost mind-boggling in the wake of the Supreme Court decision, which, as you say, it said exactly word for word, facilitate his being taken from custody of El Salvador. They quote it and say this is a false premise. They also throw around all kinds of garbage, privilege assertions, just labels. They don't try to make out what the actual prerequisites for a privilege are. They'll sometimes just not answer. They won't give people, when they're asked to identify them. So this is the kind of complete, bottom of the barrel garbage kind of litigation that the worst litigants in federal courts do. And now we have the United States doing it. And, we talked in another YouTube about what seems to be a real turning of the tide where different judges have come to understand the U.S. is not the litigant that it used to be, and they can't trust them anymore. That is just, it makes me sort of sick to my stomach as a former DOJ person. On the other hand, it's heartening because it's a fact. The administration is lying. The administration is prevaricating. The administration is, bobbing and weaving and trying to get out of things. Now, I just want to say one thing about Zinnis, because you're right. She set up this very compact, compressed time of discovery. Let's get some answers here. And they've totally flouted her and done nothing for, a third of the time has passed. And her opinion has those very, to say it of the government, things like bad faith, scarcely credible, and the like. But she is pointing toward, I think, after 2 weeks where they don't comply, some kind of contempt finding. And this is sort of similar to what's happening with Boasberg, who's trying to find out, why did you violate my order? And what they have, if it were just up to her, she would maybe, be telling them to bring their toothbrush and go to jail right now. But she knows, and so far it's working out well, but she's being very prudent so that she doesn't do anything that takes the Fourth Circuit or the Supreme Court out of her corner, because as of now, it's been so basic. And if the administration does nothing and really nothing and nothing again, then they'll be behind her. But so far, she does this really excoriating opinion, as you say, and then says, give me the answers, give them to me by actually now. They were supposed to provide them. When they don't, and they won't, not satisfactorily, then she'll say, I'm considering contempt. Then she'll bring people in front of her. She just wants to proceed on the remedy part, and the real rubber hitting the road before the Supreme Court of being upheld when she lowers the boom of not being able to be accused by the administration of being, intemperate or over aggressive. So it's this interesting dance that's going on, but I think you're right. We are at the nub of it. Court's already issued 2 opinions that basically make this point. You got to respond. You have to follow orders. You have to give basic information and due process. So far, they're not even talking much of a game, but they're definitely not walking the game. They are really being disrespectful, in a way that is breathtaking if you came up through the Department of Justice and know the basic tradition there. But that place has just been turned completely on its head by, Pam Bondi and company.
What do you make of these cases now as they're progressing with the law firms, with Wilmer Hale, with Perkins Coie, the way the trajectory of those cases are going? It's interesting here, I think, from a perspective of lawyers like you and I, is we know those law firms very well.
Yeah.
We know that these federal judges, almost all of them, work for a firm like that. Not to say the ones before them, because they would recuse themselves if it was that specific firm, but the whole process out of law school, you have the recruiting week and the big firms all show up. I've interviewed with all those firms before to see if there's a match. All these judges know those names. You're all in the same, community events and bar events. And so we all know each other. So it's just an interesting thing to see Trump's attack on those firms, the firms that bent the knee, but the firms that are standing up are getting a good reception from the judges. I mean, not simply because the judges know these firms, but it's a direct attack on the heart and soul of of law, like of the way the law industry works.
Totally. I mean, on your point, there are all these big firms. Some of them have stepped up, including originally Covington representing, was it Perkins? I forget who the first one was. But who's got the 51-page brief submitted today for Wilmer Hale with 10 different theories of unlawfulness under the First Amendment, the Due Process Clause, the Sixth Amendment? Paul Clement, and that he's a impeccably conservative, Kennedy clerk and worked for Ashcroft in the DOJ. He is clearly, a Federalist Society stalwart. So when he comes in and says it's not just the white shoe firms, he's as white shoe as it gets. And yes, you're right. They come and have made, and look, let's take a step back. Flagrantly unconstitutional. These orders, they talk a good game. It's the same problem with this, the poor schmuck who has to show up and basically lie and obfuscate. They are clearly targeting law firms because Trump doesn't like the advocacy they did or the people they represented. So it's not simply viewpoint discrimination, which is basically per se something the government can't do. It's reprisal for your First Amendment protected speech. And that's just for starters. So it is this is one where he has made the record because what's he trying to do? He's not trying to do national security or risk, as he said. He's trying to punish people who have had the nerve to disagree with him. And, it's so clearly coming through. And as you say, Ben, I think, the judiciary as a whole, definitely at the district court level, where I've never seen, administrations normally win 90%. Here they're losing 90 or 95%. I think we're over 100 injunctions now. The word is out. You cannot trust the government. They're lying and acting unconstitutionally and redoubling every day. And, judges now understand that, and that's how they approach these things. So, we are coming to a real showdown where I think the court will back the Supreme Court, the judges, and, the administration will be painted into a corner. But they really deserve to be. These are not close calls on the law. These are brazen violations of the Constitution.
It's funny, Harry, when I teach my law school class and my undergrads, I tell them, I say, look, any lawyer who tells you that they've won all of their cases is probably not a good trial lawyer at all, unless they work in the federal government, because a federal prosecutor,
if they work in the, you don't, but
because a good federal prosecutor should be doing good case selections,
right?
And they should not be going to trial on a case because of the rigorous standards we've expected of federal prosecutors, regardless of the administration, to apply before really bringing a case to trial. They would either have dismissed it before, not brought the case in the first place, whatever it is. The Trump regime is flipping that in the opposite way. And it's also very harmful, I think, to the careers of federal prosecutors, who also get measured in their future careers by their wins and losses and what cases they're bringing, especially losing in high-profile situations. And so to see, to your point, the kind of 90-10 win-to-loss ratio get flipped in the opposite direction is such a strange thing to see. But you go back to basic competence, just the basics, which to me should never be about Republican and Democrat. I could think Paul Clement looks at some issues in ways that I think are way out there, but I would never doubt that Paul Clement is an exceptionally diligent, brilliant individual. Yeah. With the Trump lawyers, I think to myself, these people are idiots. Like, they're not. They
got another problem though, because you give me 10 seconds now, because there's another problem. Facts in the law, which they don't have. So we just saw this yesterday. I wanted to puke. They had people who had worked on the Mayor Adams case. They're forced to actually dump it. And now they're told they must apologize for having done it. This is the soul of what the DOJ does. They bring cases, just as you say, having been sure they are righteous. They brought Adams' case for that reason. It's forced by the new powers that be to get rid of it. And now they have to grovel and apologize. And literally 3 more lawyers quit yesterday before they would do that. That's really turning things on their head. You're taking righteous cases, dumping them, and you're taking cases without predication against enemies, at least 2 so far, and investigating them. This is a dangerous, pernicious crowd.
There you have it. Everybody, subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube. It's the Talking Feds YouTube channel. Just search Talking Feds. Hit subscribe there as soon as you finish watching this video. And then afterwards, maybe subscribe to the Talking Feds Substack and the Talking Feds podcast. It's where I get my legal news from. There's really no one out there that's got the depth and breadth of legal knowledge and experience, especially when it comes to federal law and federal prosecutions, as Harry Litman. So it's where I get my news from. Hopefully you all subscribe as well. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.